Welcome back to part 2 of lesson 6. We're going to take a look as we left off looking at B, combining some like terms using rational numbers. And I'm going to let you take a second and look back over how we did that first one, how we looked back and found common denominators for the I and common denominators for the H. And then we were able to find our standard form. Write that down. And what I'm going to let you do now is I'm going to let you try this yourself. So in a second you're going to pause this video and you're going to attempt to solve A. And you may definitely use B and of course the example above as a reference. One thing to remember and to think about is where are your like terms? Okay? Remember that your like terms, since there are fractions, will need common denominators. And then your constants will need their own common denominator, because you will not be combining them because they're different types of terms. So if you notice here, there are two terms, yellow and orange, which means there's a very strong probability that you will have two terms, but not more than two, in your standard form. So at this time, pause your video and come back as soon as you are done. Let's take a look at what you should have. Again, your G's have a common denominator and your constants need their own common denominator. So as you can see here, I looked at finding those common denominators and found those equivalent fractions. Common denominator of 10 for the G's, common denominator of 30 for the constants. Did you combine the 4/10 and the 3/10 to get 7/10? Did you remember that this was the same as a -1, and therefore you would need the same common denominator to do the subtraction, or adding the opposite of it, which would be add a -10/10? Your end result was -3G minus 29/30. So take a quick look at yours and see how yours is the same, and if it is different, if you used a different strategy, and if you came up with the same standard form. Okay, moving on to example 2. At a store, a shirt was marked down in price by $10. So that's minus 10. A pair of pants doubled in price. That's times 2. Following these changes, the price of every item in the store was cut in half. That's times 1/2. Write two different expressions that represent the new cost of the items using S for the cost of the shirt and P for the cost of a pair of pants, and explain the different information each one shows. So I'm starting off here with the original cost minus $10. And because I'm using S, I record that as S minus 10 for a shirt cost. Then we look at the pair of pants, and the original cost was $2. So we would record that as 2P. Finally, they decided to reduce them all, or cut them all in half. So they're cutting these prices in half. So now the cost of the shirt is 1/2 S minus 10. But we know that we use that distributive property to make sure that we break it down even further and eliminate that parentheses. So it becomes 1/2 times x, because we distributed 1/2 times s, and then 1/2 times -10. So -1/2, so you kept that operation in place. And so now the new cost is 1/2 of the original cost minus $5. And then with the cost of the pants, take a look at this. It's half of the doubled price. And are you noticing that this is the multiplicative inverse? So you end up with 2/2p, which is 1/2. So the new price of the pants is going to be the first original price. Now we're going to move on to actually completing an expression in standard form. Bring this on up. Minimize our distractions here. There we go. Okay, looking at using this expression. And if we take our first step, we're dealing with some multiplication here. Our first step is going to be that we need to change this mixed number to an improper fraction. So this improper fraction becomes, and I'm going to change this to plus, a negative. So this improper fraction becomes 5 1/3 plus a negative 10/3. And then we have our parentheses, 1/2 x minus 1/4. Step 2 is remember that when you're dealing with multiplication, you don't use a common denominator. So we only do that when we're adding or subtracting with fractions. But I do want to use that distributive property. So 5 1/3 plus negative 10/3 times 1/2 x and negative 10/3 again times, you're noticing right here we've got the minus, negative 1/4. As we go down, we have a negative 10/6x plus a positive, because negative times a negative, positive 10/12. Now, I do not need a common denominator at this time right now for these, because this is with a variable x. But I do need to think about this right here, the 1/3, because these two are constants, and my constants have to have a common denominator in order for me to combine them. So I want to combine 5 1/3 plus 10/12. So I'm going to decompose 5 plus 1/3 plus 10/12 and find a common denominator. And my common denominator is 12. So 5 plus 14/12, because 1/3 is equal to 4/12. And this equals, you know, 6 2/12, which is also 6 1/6. Plus a negative, don't forget this part over here, 10/6x. And of course, that can be simplified to negative 5/3. So this is your final outcome. So notice that in each part, we continue to drop each piece that we need to. This part, we don't want to lose that negative 10x. So we've got to keep it going for the entire parts. And then we did we reduced it, found there. So 6 1/6 minus 5/3 x. But we actually would write this with the variable first, and your constant is second. So the proper way for us to write this would be negative 5/3 x plus 6 1/6. Okay, now that we have done that, I want you to take the moment and I want you to attempt exercise 3. And I'm going to let you start with, as I'm looking, I want you to try A, and then I want you to come back and let's take a look at that and see how you did. So pause your video and then come back. Okay, you're back, and let's take a look at that problem. So here we go. Did you find negative 1/2 y minus 6 7/12? Let's take a look at each step. I need to take that 1/2, and notice I changed it to the inverse, the additive inverse of plus a negative. I utilize the distributive property to eliminate the parentheses. Did your combining, your multiplication here, and found the product of negative 1/4. And now I decided that since these are the two constants, I need to combine them, and they need a they are common denominator. So I have negative 6 4/12 plus negative 3/12. And remember, 4/12 is also negative because it's a part of this mixed number. This is one number. You can see how it's been decomposed, so you get a better look. And then continue to drop this down. And remember that when we're writing it correctly, we're going to put those variables in the front in alphabetical order. Let's take a look at the next one. Okay, I'd like you to pause your video, and I would like you to complete B and come back when you're done. Okay, and we're back. So starting here, again, we already have the positive here, so we're just going to use that distributive property and combine with multiplication, find the product of 1/3 times 1/4 f. Again, we're trying to eliminate that parentheses, and then we have the positive 1/3 times a negative. And notice that I went ahead and changed this to an improper fraction, which you're going to want to do if you're dealing with multiplication. A negative 4/3. So as we come down, we have 2/3 plus 1/12 f plus a negative 4/9. And we want to combine these two constants. So if you notice, the 1/2 f has been brought down, plus 2/3 and negative 4/9 are now with common denominators, because 2/3 is equal to 6/9. And we have done that subtraction. So your final result is 1/12 f times f plus 2/9.